Sick. All right. Kasey Jo or Orvidas, now I learned how to pronounce your name. Welcome to the show.
Hi, I'm so happy to be here.
Okay. And so the direction of where I want to take this show is really to help those people that more so the 99% of people when it comes to behavior change and them believing themselves. And I really want to curate this our discussion, our coffee chat to really help meet them with where they're at. And so when it comes to the amount of clients I've worked with and really just myself is helping people become first aware of what are the things that's holding them back from their behavior change. So, say for the person who's trying to become a writer, or the person that's trying to lose weight, or just trying to develop whatever habits and skills, how can they begin to believe, or how can they begin to recognize that their mindset is potentially the first thing that's holding them back?
Yeah, that's a really good question to kick us off. And I think I'm a little bit biased because I guess, can I still call myself a mindset researcher if I'm not actively doing research, but I have published research? I was a mindset researcher. I have a lot of expertise in the world of mindset. And to me, more often than not, again, this is a biased perspective, mindset is the quote unquote issue, right? Or it is the underlying thing that people don't realize is the driver of their lack of motivation, their self sabotage, their procrastination, their inability to stick with it. And because people don't realize that that's at the core, then they're really missing how they can help themselves, how they can actually be successful, and instead kind of end up just trying to take care of it from like a surface level without going to that deeper mindset level. So with when it comes to actually recognizing if it is your mindset that's holding you back, I think first and foremost, I would just assume that it is, because that is so often what is going on beneath the surface. So if you're listening to this and you're like, it's been really hard for me to like start this thing or like stick with going to the gym or start the side hustle that I've been talking about for years, and that's something that's been on your mind, I would just assume that there's probably some level of fixed mindset stuff going on that's holding you back from getting started, from staying consistent. So starting there, I would say, is a good spot, because here's the thing: ultimately, if it's not your mindset, you're likely still going to learn something about yourself by approaching it from this way. And when I try to help people understand, like, okay, is it a fixed mindset that I have? Is that what's going on? One of the things you can really look for is the language that you use to explain yourself or explain yourself to other people, or just like the situation that you're in. So if you're someone who's like consistently trying to lose weight and that's where you're stuck, my background is in health and fitness, and I own a health and fitness coaching company. So that's where I do a lot of my examples will come from that area too. If that's where you're at and you're noticing yourself saying things like, I just have never been able to stick with a diet before, or I'm just not the type of person to stay consistent with exercise, or I could never be the girl who tracks her macros and weighs out her food. If you're saying like, I could never, or I'm always failing when it comes to diets, always, never, I'm not the type of person to, those types of words are very, very indicative of a fixed mindset. And this could be not necessarily something that you are saying out loud. It could be something that's just like chatter in the back of your mind. Like, oh, I could never do that. You're scrolling Instagram, someone's talking about their 30-pound weight loss and all of the muscle that they build. And in the back of your head, you're kind of like, yeah, but I could never do that. That could never be me. I couldn't track my macros like she did, or whatever it is comes up for you. Like, there's a fixed mindset thing going on there. And then if you're going back to like, okay, well, I got to go to the gym today, but that's what's going on in the back of your head, even if it's just kind of quiet and subtle, it will continue to hold you back, because as humans, we like to be consistent and we like to confirm what we already think. So without even realizing it, you're going to start doing things like, oh, like you skip the gym or you have a bad week with your nutrition. And then it just turns into, oh, there's more evidence as to what I was already thinking, that I'm not cut out for this, that I'm not meant for this. I'm not the type of person for this. I can't do this. So really the first step is awareness, which I know is not like the sexy answer, but becoming more aware of where your fixed mindset is showing up. is what's going to give you essentially the fuel to start shifting your mindset in the right direction. So I took that in a few different ways, but hopefully that answers your question.
That was wonderful, and there's a lot to unpack there. And I definitely want to walk through the door of we all have those voices that just echoes and just gets louder that wants to make us small or start believing that we can't do things, definitely more in the umbrella of like fixed mindset, fixed way of thinking. But just for how would you define for someone who doesn't know or aren't even aware that there's a difference when it comes to a growth mindset to fix, and they only think this is just the way that my mind is is everything true? And so, how would you define for someone to just conceptually have a point of reference the difference between a growth and a fix?
Yeah, yeah. So when we're talking about mindset, we're saying, well, at least here's how I'm talking about it and what you'll also find in like the scientific literature. Your mindset is the lens that you're essentially taking to see the world through. It's how you're making sense of things, it's how you're assigning meaning to things. So then if we break it down further from there into growth versus fixed mindset, these two separate types of mindsets, what we're really looking at a basic level is your belief in your ability to change, to improve, to develop in a certain area. And I say certain area with emphasis because you can have a growth mindset in one area and a fixed mindset in another. And I think that that's like a really a common misconception I hear a lot when people are talking about mindset. It's like this overarching mindset belief in a growth or fixed direction for everything in your life, when that's not the case. All the time people have beautiful growth mindset when it comes to their careers, but such a fixed mindset when it comes to like changing their body composition. So that can really be the case for a lot of people. But again, kind of what we're looking at is, do you actually believe that you can change? Someone with a fixed mindset doesn't necessarily believe that they can. Or again, there's just like that chatter in the back of their head of like, I don't really think you can do it, or this has never worked for you in the past. Like, what makes you think it's going to happen now? That sort of thing. Where someone with a growth mindset, even in the face of like setbacks, failures, obstacles, they still, at the end of the day, believe that they can make the changes. So those setbacks, obstacles, failures, what have you, are just opportunities to learn essentially what's not working. So give me all of these failures because I want to know, I want to get through as fast as I can all of the things that aren't going to work, because that's going to get me closer to the thing that does work. Where someone with a fixed mindset is going to see all those obstacles and setbacks and failures as more evidence as to why they're not capable. So really, really big difference. And you can quickly see like, who do you think is going more likely to be successful?
For someone that's in the camp on that side of the cliff under fixed mindset, and now listening to this, they're like, okay, cool. I am fixed here, but there's this whole other ledge where I can believe myself, but these voices are just echoing louder and louder of telling me to be small, to I can't do this, I've done this many times, etc. Now that people are becoming aware of this stuff, recognizing it, how would you help somebody to equip them to be able to bridge that? Because many people have the intention and the desire to take the next step, but now, cool, I understand that mindset is a big key player. How do I bridge that to shifting that voice to I can do this and not you can't?
Yeah, and that's the golden question, right? Like that's probably the most frequently asked question of me is, how do I move from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset? And there's a lot that goes into it, but I also want everyone listening to understand that it's really not as hard as you think. In fact, when I was actively doing research in the mindset lab at NC State, how we would shift someone's mindset in the lab in an experimental setting would literally just require them to read a fake news article. So we would have news articles like talking about, for instance, obesity and weight loss, and a fixed mindset article would say it's all about your genetics. The cards that you're dealt with are what you get. You can't make a lot of changes once you are the way you are, type of thing. Whereas the fixed mindset article would say something more along the lines of like, everybody can change their body composition. It doesn't matter where you're at. Like, your genetics are your genetics, and they could like make it a little bit easier or more difficult for you, but there's no reason you still can't change. So people would read these articles and we would essentially assess their mindset at the beginning and at the end. And it would make a significant difference just by way of reading an article. which is a little bit scary if you think about it, given how much information we are constantly consuming and how much is readily available from people who aren't always credible sources. So that makes me really nervous, thinking like all of the anti-diet messages that are out there and how like dieting doesn't work and you shouldn't even try and there's all these other things you should do instead, and all that's doing is creating a fixed mindset inside people who are reading that, thinking like, okay, why, if this isn't going to work for me, why would I ever exercise? Why would I ever try to eat healthy if it's not going to actually do anything for me in the long run? So with that said, knowing that it is possible to shift your mindset, number one, is the most important thing. So it's kind of like, what is your mindset about your ability to shift your mindset is where we want to go with that first. So I hope that me even sharing that, those of you that are listening are of the belief that it is possible for you to change the way that you think and the way that you perceive things, and therefore change your level of your likelihood of success in that area. So from there, I think a lot of it, again, unsexy answers that you just kind of have to put the reps in and you have to put effort forth, and you have to also understand that there's going to be friction. If you've been constantly thinking this way of like, I don't really think this is for me, I don't really think I'm cut out for this, I don't really think I'm capable, I don't really think I can change, if that's kind of your default setting, it's going to take time and effort and not feel super natural to shift your direction in the other way. But what you can really start to do is like what I was saying, like pick up on some of those words, the phrases, the things that you're noticing in yourself. Try to just pay more attention and start to notice when those things come up, when you're saying them, when you're thinking them. If you can just, even the first step should just be like, oh my God, I'm having a fixed mindset thought. Because so many people don't even know that they're doing it. And that's the biggest issue, is that it's sort of like this silent goal killer because you don't even know that it's happening. So first and foremost, just start noticing it and give yourself a point every single time you actually notice yourself having some of these fixed mindset thoughts or saying these fixed mindset type of things. And then from there, you can actively in the moment think to yourself, what would be the more growth oriented way of thinking about this? And it's going to feel silly and dumb. And again, just like really unnatural and maybe like uncomfortable for a lot of you too. But instead of like, oh yeah, she could do that, but that doesn't mean that I can. Okay, wait. That's a fixed mindset way of thinking about that. The reality is, if she was capable of doing it, then there's a good chance I'm capable of doing it too. And I'm sure there's like some certain resources or things that she learned that I could probably learn and obtain as well. That's a more growth mindset way of thinking about it. And if you can catch yourself, you can make that swap in the moment. You're not going to be able to do it every time, but the more often you do that, the more it's going to start to feel more natural. And eventually you'll get to the point where you come across someone and you're like, oh, wow, she lost all that weight. She kept it off. She looks great now. That's really exciting because now that feels like an inspiration to me rather than oh, she could do it. That doesn't necessarily mean that I can. So that's essentially where I would start. But that said, every person is going to need different tools and strategies and methods to help work through that. Because at the end of the day, when we're talking about fixed mindset, it really is like an umbrella for a lot of other things. Call it victim mentality, all or nothing thinking, self-sabotage, like lapses in self-control. Like we need to kind of get to the bottom of what that mechanism is underneath the fixed mindset too. And then there's obviously lots of different exercises and things you can go through to work through those like specific things that you are personally dealing with.
That's the the biggest powerful thing that you said at the very beginning that I clinged on to was that the part where you said this doesn't have to be that hard. Like believing like it doesn't have to be that hard, because I believe that many of us, and definitely me including, is that anytime I'm trying to change my mindset about something, a new behavior, and it's like this thing is hard, and I I feel like I'm putting things on a pedestal, and many others put on a pedestal and believe that and expect that it should be so hard.
Hmm.
And right there with what you said is with that study of how, hey, if you read this articles of more fixed type of content and versus not, it's like lack it's it doesn't have to be as hard as you make it to be. And just being aware and trying to take those cognitive steps to, okay, how can we start remolding our mind to think differently, so then the water, the energy, the way you think can start flowing in a different direction, instead of how everyone's looking up to being like, this has to be hard. You have to
Hmm.
do, it's very binary and dichotomous of it's just tough and suck it up. And there's no other way. And I like how you really neutralized it and brought it down to ground level to being like, guys, it's chill. It's work, but it doesn't have to be that hard. And I love
Hmm.
that message because so much of the narrative that we get whenever we see stuff online, hear from people's messages, even though the intent is coming from a good place, it really is placing things on our pedestal, and others who are light years, 10 chapters behind are perceiving it as, well, this is going to be a wild ride. This is going to be super hard. And I haven't even got a token of like a win. Like I haven't even got my first chocolate bar yet.
Hmm.
And so this is just going to be so devastating and hard. And so I love how you neutralized it and brought it down. And that's really powerful. And just for my own, since I'm on my own like journey of this whole entrepreneurial making content and the amount of self-belief that I myself am facing, and the part where you said that this is very domain specific. So the fact that I have high level of self-efficacy in my own fitness, but when it comes to like writing or marketing or like that other domains, it doesn't mean I can start removing the language of it doesn't have to be that hard.
Hmm.
And because I can do it in one domain, now I can transfer that over to another. And I believe that's a really powerful message that you just shared to help others who say are a single parent or just a parent who has three kids and they have very limited time and they excel at being parents, but now it's like, hey, you have done a hard thing, which I don't know what that feels like to have children. And if you can keep them alive, then you can transfer that belief that you can do that into another thing because no one is saying that you can't. So I
Hmm.
think that's super awesome that you just shared that and a few light bulb moments for me myself.
Yeah,
And
I love that you bring that up too, because I think a lot of times, especially like in the business space, it's a lot of like prepare for it to be difficult, like expect it to be hard. You know, if you're having a long day and you still have more stuff to do, like this is what you signed up for, you know, type of thing. And I think sometimes that mentality can be helpful because we want to hear from people, especially like at higher levels. Like Alex Hormozy like comes to mind for sure with like this kind of stuff. It's like he's talking all the time about like it is a grind, but I love it, you know, and you have to like just learn to love the hard work. And that's a big part of this. And I think that can be a helpful mentality to have for people who do feel like they're in the thick of it and they're like, God, should it feel this hard? And it's like, no, like Alex Hormozy is saying, yeah, it's still hard for me too, you know? And I think that that can kind of normalize those feelings and allow people to keep going even when it is hard, because I don't want it to feel like also if it's not easy for you, then it's not meant for you, because that's not the case either. But I think when it comes specifically to shifting your mindset, people do think like, oh, this is this like super hardwired thing that's impossible to shift. When the reality is like, no, we've seen it shift like honestly relatively easily, right? So it just becomes like it does get to be easier than you think. And I think that that is like the important takeaway there for sure.
and to piggyback off that with Alex Ramosi, um, he's been a key figure for me to from many different domains, but right there with what you just said of how he's the first example of being like, hey, this is hard. He does come off slightly as this is supposed to suck, the
Hmm.
rest of it. And for him, the pieces fit and it aligns with them. Like it works for him and doesn't work for everybody else. And I feel like there's a lot of mentality of and appearances matter too. And so me, if I were to speak to somebody, because majority of fitness people, not hold on, I'm not going to say majority, but like there's a lot of dudes, and people who are on the receiving end are from appearance wise, they like I am a young 20 something year old male. So appearance wise, if I was talking to a mother of three who's in her mid 40s, who does not have the body image to society's standards or her own standards, I'm approaching that with a level of two hands tied behind my back. and maybe that she may perceive me, even though where I'm coming from is not a place of bad, or but perception and how she perceives me is differently, and she maybe other people may perceive things as like toxic gym rat culture mindset stuff, and how it always supposed to be hard, like we were just talking about. But I've been listening to another guy named Ali Abdal. Have you heard of him?
Mm-mm.
So he is a UK doctor turned YouTuber entrepreneur, and he just wrote a book called Feel Good Productivity. And that has been a really big eye opening for my own journey of viewing things not through a keyhole of this is supposed to be hard, but more so of feeling good. Of
Mm.
the question he asked is, what would this look like if this was fun?
I love
And
that.
that
Mhm.
has been such a profound thing because I don't like doing things that I'm not having fun. It's just how I'm wired. Like grad school, I found a way to make it fun. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done it. And so, from your end, how would you, just from as being you're a psychology researcher, you have the PhD here. Um, from your side, how just unpack that more of like what you've seen of people, how to make things fun, how to make this process enjoyable.
Yeah, yeah, and that's a great point. It makes a lot of sense from a motivation perspective when we're looking at motivation again from sort of like the scientific lens. It sits on a continuum from a motivation, which is just lack of motivation altogether, to extrinsic motivation towards intrinsic motivation. And intrinsic motivation is, for lack of a better term, the best type of motivation. If you want to stay consistent, you want to stay motivated, you want to keep doing something over and over again. And at its core, at like the most pure form of intrinsic motivation is doing it because you enjoy it. And I think we all understand, like you are saying, if you are enjoying doing something, you're more likely to do it again in the future and like want to do it again in the future. So a lot of what it comes down to, and this is something that I teach inside the health mindset coaching certification to other coaches. It's how we coach inside my coaching company. Like, how can we look for more intrinsically motivating ways to help clients stick with the plan, go to the gym, eat healthy, etc. How could we help them enjoy it better? And then there's some other like versions of extrinsic motivation that are a little bit closer. It's called, this is all from self-determination theory. So the more self-determined something is, the more likely you are to keep up with it. So there are extrinsic motivators, which sounds like it would not be good, but extrinsic motivators that are closer on that spectrum to intrinsic motivation that are related to, I want to do this because it's tied to my values, because it's tied to my identity, it's tied to like other things that are important to me. So those are other things that you can kind of look for outside of just seeking enjoyment, because here's the thing, we're not always going to love and enjoy going to the gym. It doesn't matter how long you've been doing it, how into it you are. If you own a health and fitness coaching company, you've been a coach for a decade, like there's still going to be days where you're like, I just really don't want to go get under the bar today. Like that's going to happen. So some of these other things are what are likely going to keep you going. So I'm not really enjoying this today, but it is very much tied to who I am. It's what I do. It's what I value. And so you're still going to go, right? So I think that there's a lot of different things we can look for when it comes to helping people or helping ourselves stay more motivated to do anything. But when it comes to enjoyment, I do think that that's a big one. And that question of like, how can I make this more fun is awesome. And there's actually, you may be familiar with like some of the research. I can never pronounce his last name because it's like a million letters long, but it's all about flow state and kind of getting into that state of time doesn't really make sense. You're just like really into, like you're zoned in on what you're doing. That flow state is like what we really want to try to achieve. A lot of the time it can happen when you're working out, you're running, you're working, you're reading, you're doing something where you're like time kind of just like goes away. And that really is something you want to look to try to achieve too. So for those of you listening, anytime you have achieved that, you can kind of reverse engineer and see like, how can I put that into other areas too? Another thing, last thing I'll say on this kind of topic is temptation bundling is a great way to kind of introduce more fun and enjoyment into an activity that you haven't historically really enjoyed. And temptation bundling is the idea that you're taking something that is tempting to you, something that you would typically like to do, watching trashy reality TV show, reading a fiction novel, watching YouTube videos, scrolling TikTok, whatever it is, you save that activity for one of these other activities that you're trying to get done. So a really good example is like getting steps in or doing your cardio, right? So instead of like listening to this audiobook or watching that TV show just at the end of the day or in your car or whatever, please don't watch reality TV when you're driving. That was not a very good example. Saving it for those instances. So like, okay, I got to do my 30 minutes of cardio. I'm doing 30 minutes of cardio 2 times per week, and I'm going to save watching this show during that time. So your temptation bundling is this idea that you're bundling the thing that you don't really want to do with the thing that you do want to do. And over time, they kind of become one. And now you kind of look forward to doing your cardio because it means you get to do this other thing too. There is a little bit of like, I use this almost with caution because I don't want it to turn into like, I can't ever enjoy exercise unless reality TV is involved. But it is something that can help you like get started, maybe get over the hump if you're in a rut of like not being consistent, and then keep going from there.
For the person who is taking this, they've found a way to have fun with it. They've started bundling their temptations together of just everything that you just said, but now they hit a setback. They hit a roadblock. Life happened, something happened, and they fell off the wagon for quote unquote like a week or two, weren't able to go to gym because a family member got sick, something with work projects got longer, and now they're trying to pick up the momentum. But now the door is creaking back open of, hey, you've slipped up before. Hey, you've had setbacks before. You're not going to make it. You're just going to fail. And there's those little voices that start coming in. And how would you approach if you had a client or someone you're talking to that is doing great, but they hit those quote unquote setbacks, and how to manage the chaos in their mind to believe that this time will be different? That how would you?
I would honestly say you could have a few setbacks of this magnitude of 1 to 2 weeks throughout the year and still make a very, very significant amount of progress. That we're not shooting for 100% perfect. We're not even shooting for 90% perfect. Like you could do a lot with 80% perfection. And I can't do quick math very well, regardless of the PhD. So if we're looking at 80% of the year and like however many workouts you're trying to get done in a week, that's a really solid chunk. Like you could probably remove an entire like month or two of your 12 months of consistency, and you're looking at then like 10 months out of 12 of being consistent. Like you don't think you're going to do something with that? Like you don't think something's going to come of those 10 months because you skipped those 2 months? So I think just like helping people zoom out a little bit like that and see it for what it really is over the long term can be really helpful, and also give people permission to be okay with like taking that week off here or there, especially if it's something that's out of your control, which is the case in a lot of instances. And also, I like to think too, I just got back from a 12-day trip. I did not track a macro. I did not go to the gym one time. I'm incredibly sore this week because I took so much time off, but that was something of my choosing, right? I chose to take time off, and then I come back, I get back home, and I just jump back into it. That feels so different to people than when, oh, I got sick and then my kid got sick and then I didn't have a car, so it was hard for me to get to the gym, and like all of these things happened, and so I didn't go to the gym for 2 weeks. But that's the same amount of time as choosing to go on like a 12-day vacation and not working out during that time. But it feels so different when it's like out of your control, and like that life threw me off, and like that's going to keep happening, so what's the point of even continuing to go on, versus like, oh, I'm taking this structured dedicated amount of time off, and then when I get back I'll just get back into it. It's the same. The only difference is like your perception of it and how you see it differently. So I think keeping that in mind too is like ultimately if you're taking a week off to go on vacation versus you took a week off accidentally because of stuff that happened in your life, it's the same week off, and we're still talking about those 2 months out of 12 for the entire year. So really, like, again, taking a step back, zooming out, like, what does this actually mean? How does this actually impact my progress? Chances are it really doesn't in the long term. That can be a really helpful just like shift, because it can feel really heavy and like really bad in the moment. But when you zoom out, you're like, oh, right, it's actually just a drop in the ocean. So having that conversation and trying to take that perspective to the best of your ability can be really helpful. I think too, something people should know is like on the way to building habits, taking time off here or there, like skipping a day, skipping a week, whatever, ultimately really does not make a difference in your habit formation. And we have research to support this too. And there's a specific study, and I don't remember exactly all of the details, but on average, they were saying that like for any given habit that you're trying to develop, it takes somewhere between 18 and like 254 days to develop that habit. So the idea of like, what is it, 21 days to form a habit is actually kind of bullshit. It's actually on this spectrum of like 18 to 254, depending on the habit, depending on the person, et cetera, et cetera. But something the study also found was that people who were trying to develop something to be more habitual, whether it took them 18 days or 254, 64 days, whatever it was, if they took a day off here or there and then got back to it and made absolutely no difference. So skipping a day versus not skipping a day ultimately made no difference in them actually developing that habit long term. Obviously, if you're taking like a like month off here, a month off there, and like it's really inconsistent and you're more inconsistent than you are consistent, then that's a different story. But usually when we're talking, and like the example that you gave, like that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about drops in the ocean where ultimately we shouldn't be giving it as much power as we do.
There's so much power when it comes to reframing how you're perceiving the world and everything. And earlier, the thing that you said about the lens of what you see the world through is, it's so cool that you said that, because there's something that I talk to my clients about and I just kind of came up in my own head, and it's cool to hear validated from you, is that like there's only two things I've found true around my 28 laps around this ball, is that there's only I can the only two things I have found true is what lens do I see the world through, and what am I going to do next. Those are the only two
Mm.
things that I have found true that all of us can control. Everything else falls into the bucket of we can't control. So I think I try to make the point of reference in my mind of like glasses. If you can't see, are they broken? You fix them. Or if they are foggy, you wipe them, and if you don't need them anymore, you toss them and change them for a different pair. And so if the way that you're seeing the world isn't serving the big goal that you were striving for, your thoughts, not every thought has to be not every thought is real. If how you help neutralize that, and then not every emotion has to be a command to do it. And I like how you zoomed out a big picture of a drip in a ocean, just because, and I feel like people, even myself included, have a negative relationship with the word consistency, meaning the way that many of us define it is it must be every day, all or nothing, or else you are no longer consistent. You no longer get to wear that badge of honor. And you unpacking how we can just zoom out, lack a better term, slang, it's not that deep. It's okay to kind of
Exactly.
it's okay to pick up, and how you just shared how you manage a lot on your plate, and you were able to eject yourself out for X amount of days to go have time for yourself. And then you come back, and I'm sure you're not putting yourself through mental purgatory of, oh my God, I 11 days behind, nothing's done. It's almost kind of like how the mom and the kids, where they're having people over and the mom's yelling at all the kids like, clean this, vacuum the ceiling, brush the toilet seat with your toothbrush. We got to do everything, like those type of videos. And it doesn't have to be that chaotic within your own mind, and understanding how to manage it and seeing it from a global perspective is really powerful, and helps people understand like it's okay. One day off, a week off, whatever, however way you define your setbacks, is it's life. It's just seasons, it's periods, it's temporary moments, and just like a poem, it's one thing and it shifts to another thing. And I think that's really cool. And with all this talk on behavior change, what ignited you to even walk down this path to learn as much as you can about it?
Yeah. Like how far back do we need to go to explain this story? When I was in college, I was studying psychology and sociology, but I was on a like criminology forensic science track, and I did research in jails and prisons. I actually wanted to be a prison warden, to be to be totally honest, which is very interesting given the direction that I did end up going. But that's how I fell into the world of research. And so I was getting my degree in psychology and sociology, doing research in prisons, and then for my own personal life, I was really starting to fall in love with nutrition, learning everything about strength training. I like lived on bodybuilding.com. This was like, okay, 2012, 13 era. Um, Watched tons of like YouTubers in the area and was just like really falling in love with how great it made me feel and just how empowered I felt. And it definitely bled over into dedication in other areas of my life too. And it really got me thinking, especially being a psychology student at the time, like, why are more people not doing this? It makes you feel so good. It's obviously like riddled with benefits in all different parts of your life for your physical health, your mental health, all of this stuff. Why do we have like an obesity epidemic on our hands? Why is it so hard to get people to exercise and take care of themselves? And it's not a knowledge problem. They all know they need to do it. Everyone you meet on the street is going to tell you they know they need to eat fruits and vegetables and exercise. Like, this is not like a dearth of knowledge. So what's going on here? And so I really started to play with the idea of like, where, like, how do I answer this question? Like, how can I better understand this? And because I was so just like psychology minded, I guess, like that's just like the direction I thought. I was like, there has to be something there. Like it has to be something that people are holding themselves back in a way. There's something going on. So I essentially wanted to spend more time in this area, and also got to the point where I was thinking about where's my career path really going to go, and recognizing that everybody is interested in forensic science to some degree, right? That's why we have true crime podcasts. NCIS has been around for freaking forever, like all of this stuff. So everyone's interested in that area. Not everyone's interested in health and fitness like this. So what's really cool about psychology is that it's everywhere, right? You can look at psychology, like use the lens of psychology to look at pretty much anything in life. So I kind of made the pivot. I had the research experience, just not in that area, and really started to look at PhD programs, master's programs that are in this area of health behavior change and what that could potentially look like for me. So I applied to a lot of programs. I eventually got in and settled on it's a social and community psychology program at NC State. And I would be working with a faculty member in the mindset lab. And I knew nothing about mindset yet, especially not as a science. And again, this was now at this point, 2014, 2015. Mindset was not as popular as it is, like as a buzzword. And I had no idea that there was actually a science behind it. But Dr. Jenny Burnett, my to-be PhD advisor, was doing research on mindsets for obesity and what it would mean if someone has a fixed mindset about their like ability to lose weight, what that actually means for their health behaviors. And that really intrigued me. So that was the direction that I was like, this is where I would want to go with my own research. So I did move to Raleigh, North Carolina from Minneapolis, Minnesota, and did my PhD there, and really quickly fell in love with the world of behavior change and mindset. And at the same time, I became a nutrition coach. So that's how I was kind of attempting to pay my bills while being a grad student. And it was really cool for me because I got to not only do this work in the lab, but then take kind of what I was learning and go and directly work with people one-on-one in the real world. So I had a really cool blend of this going on at the same time. And that's where I really started to think like, this needs to be in the health and fitness coaching world far more than it currently is, which is like, it's honestly somewhat embarrassing how little training in psychology health and fitness coaches get. So that's kind of what led me down the path to everything that I'm doing today.
Is there something in on your own life right now that you're struggling with, that you're having to reframe your own mindset?
I think, as you know, probably very well, entrepreneurship is a constant mindset exercise. And especially like being a business owner and being fully responsible for your own living and your ability to save money and be who you're going to be in the future and all of this stuff, it can be really heavy. And that's something that I still struggle with all of the time. So I'm constantly needing to like bring myself back down to earth and think about like where I'm at, obviously be grateful for the success I have had so far, and be careful of my own fixed mindset of like I have a ceiling and this is like the best it's going to get. Like for a good example is the health mindset coaching certification. So I started running this program in 2020. We've now done 7 or 8 rounds of it. So we open enrollment two times per year. So I'm having 2 launches per year. And the last probably 4 or 5 out of those 8 times have been about the same amount of people coming through into the program, same amount of revenue. And I'm like, okay, maybe this is it. This is the best it's going to get, even though I'm trying different strategies and I'm trying to continue to increase that. So it can be really hard when you have this evidence of like, well, this is what you've done. What makes you think you can do more? But I know it's possible, right? So it's that's like a good example of something that I am always like trying to improve on. And I understand too, obviously, probably too well, how much my mindset about all of this is going to impact my ability to be successful. So I'm probably more cognizant than I maybe even should be a lot of times about like how I'm thinking about things and how that's going to impact stuff. But yeah, so that's what's most top of mind, is just like being a business owner every day.
Through all the hard things that you've done and are continuing to do, what's that psychological break the glass moment that always pulls you back, that helps you center yourself, to be still, that to help fuel the it's okay, I can do this?
Yeah, good question.
Is there a one thing for you?
I don't know if it's a one thing. I definitely have different like series of questions and stuff that I ask myself, and this is like I think something that could be applied for a lot of people in a lot of different situations, is essentially looking at the thought that you're having that's causing you anxiety, stress, nervousness, whatever that thought is that's coming up for you. And again, it could be related to business, it could be fitness, it could be relationships, whatever. Like asking yourself what evidence you have for that thought, because there is some evidence. Otherwise, you wouldn't be having the thought, right? So, for instance, with my example, I have yet to break the ceiling of X amount of revenue. So, my evidence that I can't break it is that I haven't yet. So, like, that is like some evidence, right? Like, that's valid. But then asking yourself, what evidence do you have against that thought? So, for my case, there's a lot of things that I can still try, a lot of different opportunities. I'm always growing my audience. I'm always growing my connections. Like I can't necessarily say that I'm never going to do something when I'm constantly trying new things and constantly creating more space for that success to happen. So then you have the evidence for, you have the evidence against, and then kind of taking both of those things. What is a more accurate depiction of that thought? Because usually those thoughts that you're having are not fully accurate. And the anxiety, the stress, the anxiousness, um, anxiety and anxiousness, nervousness is coming from the less accurate depiction of it, right? So if we can take a more accurate depiction would be, I have not got to that level yet, but there's no reason I can't. I just haven't seen it yet. Like that's the more accurate depiction. And that already can feel a little bit more like grounding, like, oh yeah, that's right. That's true. And if I keep trying new things, I keep growing my audience, I keep trucking along, like there's no reason I can't unlock another level. Like I've done it before, like I can continue to unlock more levels in the future. And then kind of just noticing how going through that process makes you feel differently. Because that's a big part. I think a lot of people, when you're sitting with yourself, you're journaling, you're asking yourself questions, you're in therapy, whatever, you're having some of these revelations and you're like, oh, okay, cool. And then you move on. But instead, you should really think like, how do I feel differently now that I've had this bit of a revelation or a light bulb moment, or I feel better in this moment? Like really sit with that feeling for a second, because that's what's going to keep you coming back, kind of bringing this full circle to like enjoying something. If you enjoy how you feel, if you really like that feeling of like, okay, I feel more grounded, this makes more sense now, I'm glad I just went through that, really sit with that for a second. Don't just immediately move on, because then next time you experience it, because most likely there will be a next time, you'll more likely go to that good feeling, the more accurate depiction of that thought, because you took the time to sit with it and really work through it before it just becomes a little bit more accessible and salient.
The emphasis that you gave how you were when you were unsharing saying yet, you kept injecting that at the very end, hooking it yet, and that's so powerful because it's not a period, it's not a statement, it's not a fact, it's you haven't done this yet. So no one, it's also goes back to the beginning, full circle of how just neutralizing everything, putting everything on level ground of that you haven't done this yet. And I love that tool that you used. And for anyone else who's listening to this, whatever the thing may be that you were trying to become or work or develop, and if it's your first go around at it, fifth go around, or in different domains, you can use different tools and be as introspective as you need to help you. And attaching that yet at the very end is powerful, allowing you to believe and give yourself permission that you just haven't done this thing yet, and it's okay because you will get there, because no one is saying that you can't do it. And I love that you said that, and that you use different tools and different self-talks for different seasons and different challenges that you face. And just because something worked once doesn't mean that it's has to work or it will work another time. It's just like tools in the toolbox. And I think that's so powerful. And just from me following you the last 5 years, I think like around 2019 was when I was graduating with my master's and embarking on this whole path. And a lot of I did struggle, or I still do struggle with a lot of self belief and doubt and the voices in my own mind. And you were one of the giants that I looked up to online because I found you, not sure how, but I've seen your course. Haven't done your course yet, but it's been on my to do list for so long now, just not financially ready to take that investment just yet. But I've been picking up on all your stuff. And so thankful for everything that the content you've put out. I've even screenshotted certain things to being like, I know this is important. This is in her course. I can't afford it, but she's leaving breadcrumbs behind. And I'm going to pick up those breadcrumbs, and I know I'm going to use this later. And just want to let you know that for me to get to where I am now, you have played a huge role, influential role, even from a distance without knowing it. And just the fact that we're on this call and having this discussion, and other people can have a peek of a window into this conversation, is going to be so powerful because I listen to you and others, and those little how I didn't have the environment that I needed to foster my self belief. So I tried doing it through social media, podcasts, and because social media can it's a very thin line of dangerous implosion and self sabotage to abundance to open it's like the master key to so many things. And just having this conversation with you is unpacking opening one of those doors, and I hope this opens and saves somebody else who's in that state that I was in, and that still helps. And so I just want to say thank you for jumping on this talk with me, and for all the work that you've done thus far and will continue to do.
Oh, that was so sweet. I can't believe you've been like around for that long. You've really seen a lot. That's awesome though. I'm so happy. And like that's one of the things, like obviously if someone can't make it into the health mindset coaching certification, you can't become a client of ours at KJO coaching. Obviously my goal is that there is still tons and tons and tons and tons of free resources and content to really still get you started. So I take pride in that aspect of what I do inside of my business is just providing tons of free value. So I'm so glad that you've actually been able to pick it up and implement it, because a lot of people then go, oh yeah, I'm going to save this thing. I'm going to screenshot this thing and never come back to it. Right. So like good for you also.
Thank you. And just if this helps add evidence to the pile for when you, because you are not immune to the feelings of these negative thoughts that we have been talking about. You are human as well, even though you are a mile deep into the pool of knowledge. It doesn't mean that you are completely immune and impenetrable to all the thoughts that can come out from inward. And so I hope that this gives to you from me from a distance after 5 years that the things that you do matters. And for anybody else to listen to this, it's not about what you don't have, because I've not had a lot of things, but working with what you can work with, what is accessible to you now. This podcast, even if you need to listen to it 1,000 times, maybe it's that over intervals of months and years and some stuff like that, and others, you have information around you. There's tools. Just be aware of the breadcrumbs. They're there. They can help you. And just want to be mindful of your time since you do have to get going on to your next thing. Just want to say thank you, Dr. Kasey Jo Orvidas.
There you
Learn,
go.
learn, how, learn how to pronounce it correctly. For 5 years, I butchered it. My fault. Just want to say thank you, and just want to leave the floor open for you for where people can find you, what you're up to next.
Yeah. So if you're interested in any of the free content resources that I was referring to, the best place to go grab those, you can follow me on Instagram. I'm Coach Kasey Jo over there, and the link in my bio will take you to all of the free fun stuff. That's where I post the majority of the free content as well. You can also find me on YouTube and on TikTok, but I'm not as present there. Like Instagram's really my jam. So feel free to reach out there if you have any questions, if you're interested in anything. And yeah, you'll pretty much can navigate yourself to anything else from there.
Everything will be in the show notes. Thank you, Kasey. Bye,
Thank
guys.
you.